Welcome to Cine Facts, where every movie hides a secret, every scene tells a deeper story, and every frame contains details most viewers never notice. From legendary blockbusters and mind-bending science fiction, to dark thrillers, unforgettable horror, and hidden cinematic gems, we explore the facts, theories, Easter eggs, behind-the-scenes secrets, and untold stories that make movies truly unforgettable. This isn't just watching movies, this is discovering what lies beneath them. Subscribe to Cine Facts and step beyond the screen. The film also features Keith David as Max Keller, one of Hatcher's closest friends and allies. Keith David had already established himself as one of Hollywood's most respected character actors by the time Marked for Death was produced. His deep voice, commanding presence, and versatility had earned him memorable roles in several important films throughout the 1980s. Among David's most notable earlier performances was his role in Platoon, the Academy Award-winning Vietnam War drama directed by Oliver Stone. He also appeared in The Thing, a science fiction horror classic directed by John Carpenter that would later gain enormous critical acclaim. Another significant role came in They Live, where his memorable fight scene opposite Roddy Piper became legendary among fans of cult cinema. In Marked for Death, David provides an important balance to Seagal's character. While Hatcher is often calm and reserved, Max displays a more energetic and outspoken personality. Their friendship feels believable because of the strong chemistry between the actors. David's charisma and natural screen presence elevate many scenes and give the audience someone to support alongside the protagonist. His performance contributed significantly to the film's popularity and demonstrated why he would continue to enjoy a long and successful acting career. Joanna Pakua portrays Leslie, Hatcher's love interest. Born in Poland, Pakua gained recognition during the 1980s for her beauty, sophistication, and dramatic acting abilities. She received widespread attention for her performance in Gorky Park, a thriller that earned strong reviews and introduced her to international audiences. Throughout the decade, she appeared in various dramas and thrillers, establishing herself as a dependable performer capable of bringing depth to supporting roles. In Marked for Death, Pakua's character serves as an emotional anchor for Hatcher. Although the film focuses heavily on action and revenge, her presence adds moments of humanity and vulnerability. She helps remind viewers that Hatcher is fighting not only for justice but also to protect the people he loves. One of the most memorable performances in the movie comes from Basil Wallace, who portrays the villain Screwface. Wallace was born in Jamaica and brought authenticity to the role through his cultural background and commanding physical presence. Before appearing in Marked for Death, he had worked in television and film, building experience as a versatile actor. Screwface became one of the most iconic villains in the action genre. Wallace infused the character with an intimidating blend of mysticism, brutality, and unpredictability. His performance helped elevate the film beyond a simple action story. The character's reputation spread among fans, and many still consider Screwface one of the most memorable antagonists in Seagal's filmography. Wallace's portrayal was so effective that it became a defining moment in his career. Tom Wright appears as Charles, another trusted friend of Hatcher. Wright had already developed a solid career in television and film before joining the cast. His role may not receive as much attention as some of the others, but his performance contributes to the strong sense of community that exists among Hatcher's allies. The friendship between these characters creates emotional stakes that make the story more engaging. The supporting cast also includes performers such as Elizabeth Grayson, Bette Ford, and Danny Trejo. Although Trejo's role is relatively small, his appearance is noteworthy because he would later become one of Hollywood's most recognizable tough guy actors. At the time, he was still early in his film career and frequently appeared in supporting roles that capitalized on his rugged appearance and intimidating presence. When Marked for Death premiered in 1990, it entered a cinematic landscape dominated by action heroes, crime thrillers, and stories centered on vigilantism. The late 1980s and early 1990s represented a golden age for action cinema. Audiences flocked to theaters to watch larger-than-life protagonists battle criminal organizations, corrupt officials, and international threats. While Marked for Death was not the highest-profile action release of its year, It became one of the defining entries in Steven Seagal's career and left a lasting mark on action movie culture. To understand the film's cultural significance, it is important to examine the period in which it was released. The United States during the late 1980s experienced widespread concerns about drug trafficking, gang violence, and urban crime. News broadcasts frequently highlighted stories involving narcotics distribution, organized criminal activity, and law enforcement struggles. These issues became common subjects in movies and television shows. Audiences were eager for stories in which dangerous criminals were confronted and defeated by strong, capable heroes. Marked for Death directly tapped into these social anxieties. The film centers on former DEA agent John Hatcher, who is forced back into action after a violent Jamaican drug gang invades his community. The story reflected fears that many viewers associated with organized crime and the spread of narcotics into neighborhoods. Although the movie exaggerated these concerns for dramatic effect, it resonated with audiences who were familiar with similar themes appearing in newspapers and television reports. The film also arrived during a period when action heroes were evolving. During the 1980s, stars such as Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone dominated the genre with characters who relied heavily on overwhelming firepower and physical strength. Steven Seagal represented a different approach. His characters often emphasized martial arts skills, efficiency, and discipline rather than sheer muscle. This distinction helped him stand out in an increasingly crowded market. The success of Marked for Death further solidified Seagal's position within action cinema. The film demonstrated that audiences were interested in heroes who used martial arts as their primary combat style. While martial arts films had already achieved popularity through performers like Bruce Lee and later Jean-Claude Van Damme, Seagal brought a distinctly American law enforcement flavor to the formula. His characters were often former military personnel, police officers, or government agents who combined professional training with martial arts expertise. One of the most significant cultural contributions of Marked for Death was the creation of Screwface as an iconic action movie villain. Portrayed by Basil Wallace, Screwface stood apart from many generic antagonists of the era. He was portrayed as mysterious, ruthless, and seemingly supernatural. His intimidating presence and memorable dialogue helped make him one of the most recognizable villains in Seagal's filmography among action movie fans. Screwface became a frequently discussed character. Even decades after the film's release, discussions about memorable action villains often include his name. The character's combination of criminal authority, Jamaican cultural influences, and mystical overtones created a unique antagonist who differed from the typical drug kingpins or military villains commonly seen in action films. The movie also contributed to the growing visibility of Jamaican culture within mainstream American entertainment. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, reggae music and Jamaican cultural influences were becoming increasingly familiar to international audiences. Marked for Death incorporated elements of Jamaican language, music, and spiritual traditions into its story. While some critics later argued that certain portrayals relied on stereotypes or simplified representations, the film nevertheless introduced many viewers to aspects of Jamaican culture they had not previously encountered. The depiction of the Possum Gang and its connections to spiritual beliefs became one of the film's most talked about elements. The combination of crime, drama, and supernatural suggestions created an unusual atmosphere that distinguished the movie from more conventional action films. Whether audiences viewed these elements as authentic or exaggerated, they contributed significantly to the film's identity. The movie's influence also extended into home video culture. During the early 1990s, video rental stores represented a major part of entertainment consumption. Many action films reached larger audiences through VHS rentals than through theatrical screenings alone. Marked for Death became a popular rental title, introducing the film to viewers who may not have seen it during its theatrical run. This home video success played an important role in establishing the movie's long-term reputation. Countless viewers discovered the film on VHS and later revisited it through DVD, cable television broadcasts, and streaming services. As a result, The movie developed a loyal fan base that continued to grow long after its initial release. The film also became part of a broader trend involving revenge-driven action narratives. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, audiences embraced stories in which heroes sought justice after their loved ones were threatened or harmed. Marked for Death followed this tradition while adding its own distinctive martial arts style and cultural influences. Many later action films continued using similar narrative structures. The idea of a retired or reluctant hero being forced back into action became one of the genre's most enduring formulas. The making of Marked for Death reflects both the strengths and challenges of action filmmaking during the late 1980s and early 1990s. Released in 1990, the film arrived at a time when studios were eager to capitalize on the growing popularity of Steven Seagal, whose first two films had established him as one of Hollywood's newest action stars. Behind the scenes, however, the production involved creative experimentation, practical stunt work, demanding fight choreography, and efforts to distinguish the movie from the many action films being produced during that era. The project was directed by Dwight H. Little, a filmmaker who had already developed a reputation for working within the action and thriller genres. Before directing Marked for Death, Little had worked on several film and television productions, gaining valuable experience handling suspense, action sequences, and character-driven storytelling. His directing style emphasized clarity and momentum, making him a strong choice for a movie that relied heavily on physical confrontations and escalating tension. One of Little's primary objectives was ensuring that the film felt more intense and dangerous than Steven Seagal's previous projects. While Above the Law and Hard to Kill had established Seagal's screen persona, Marked for Death was intended to raise the stakes. The filmmakers wanted audiences to feel that John Hatcher faced a truly frightening enemy, one capable of threatening not only him but also everyone around him. The screenplay was written by Michael Grayes and Mark Victor, a writing team known for creating stories that combined action with elements of suspense and supernatural mystery. The writers sought to move beyond a simple crime narrative by incorporating aspects of Jamaican culture and spirituality into the story. This decision gave the film a unique identity compared to other action movies of the period. One of the most discussed aspects of the production involved the creation of the villain Screwface. From the earliest stages of development, the filmmakers understood that the antagonist needed to be memorable. Many action films of the era featured villains who were little more than obstacles for the hero to defeat. The creative team wanted Screwface to stand out. When Basil Wallace was cast in the role, the filmmakers found exactly what they were looking for. Wallace brought authenticity, intensity, and charisma to the character. Born in Jamaica, he understood many of the cultural influences that shaped Screwface's identity. According to various accounts from production, Wallace worked closely with the filmmakers to ensure that the character felt distinctive and believable despite the movie's larger-than-life tone. Steven Seagal was heavily involved in shaping the action sequences. By the time Marked for Death entered production, he had already earned a reputation for wanting significant control over how fight scenes were designed and filmed. Unlike many actors who relied extensively on stunt doubles, Seagal performed a substantial amount of his own martial arts choreography. His background in Aikido influenced nearly every combat sequence in the film. The fight scenes were designed to showcase techniques involving throws, joint locks, and rapid takedowns rather than traditional boxing-style exchanges. This approach helped distinguish Seagal from other action stars. The production team carefully planned each confrontation to highlight his unique fighting style while maintaining a sense of realism and brutality. The stunt performers faced considerable challenges throughout filming. Action movies during this period depended almost entirely on practical effects. There were no advanced digital tools available to remove safety equipment or enhance physical impacts. Every punch, fall, explosion, and stunt had to be carefully coordinated and executed in real locations. Several sequences required performers to crash through windows, tumble down staircases, or engage in complex hand-to-hand combat. Safety teams worked extensively behind the scenes to ensure that these stunts could be performed without serious injury. Nevertheless, Action filmmaking in that era always carried risks, and the cast and crew had to maintain a high level of concentration throughout production. One of the film's strengths is its convincing urban atmosphere. Much of the movie was filmed in Chicago, Illinois. The city's neighborhoods, industrial locations, streets, and residential areas provide an authentic backdrop for the story. Rather than constructing elaborate sets, the filmmakers chose to take advantage of real-world environments whenever possible. Chicago's architecture helped create a sense of realism that grounded the movie's more exaggerated action elements. The contrast between ordinary neighborhoods and the violence brought by Screwface's gang became an important visual theme. Viewers could easily imagine these events unfolding in a recognizable American city, which increased the tension and emotional impact of the story. Filming on location presented numerous logistical challenges. Streets had to be closed, traffic redirected, and local residents informed about the production schedule. Action scenes involving gunfire and explosions required additional planning to ensure public safety. The production team worked closely with city officials to coordinate these activities while minimizing disruption to surrounding communities. The film's special effects were almost entirely practical. Explosions, blood effects, broken glass, and weapon impacts were created using traditional techniques. Practical effects artists spent considerable time preparing each action sequence, often building specialized props designed to break safely on camera. The final confrontation between Hatcher and Screwface represented one of the most ambitious sequences in the production. The filmmakers wanted the climax to feel larger and more intense than anything that had come before. Multiple stunt performers, practical effects crews, and camera teams worked together to create the dramatic ending. The sequence required extensive preparation and numerous takes to achieve the desired result. Another challenge involved balancing the film's action with its supernatural undertones. The screenplay hinted that Screwface possessed unusual spiritual abilities and mystical protection. Marked for Death follows a classic revenge-driven action formula, but its success lies in the way it combines personal stakes, escalating danger, memorable villains, and relentless pacing. While many action films of the late 1980s and early 1990s relied on simple stories, Marked for Death keeps audiences engaged by gradually increasing the threat level and forcing its hero into a conflict that becomes more dangerous with every scene. The film's narrative structure is carefully designed to transform what begins as a retirement story into a brutal war between one man and an entire criminal organization. The story begins with John Hatcher, a veteran Drug Enforcement Administration agent who has spent years fighting drug traffickers. Early scenes establish that Hatcher is exhausted by the violence and danger that have defined his career. During a drug operation, he witnesses the devastating consequences of the criminal world he has spent years battling. This experience convinces him that he can no longer continue living such a dangerous life. Unlike many action heroes who eagerly seek confrontation, Hatcher initially wants peace. He decides to retire from federal law enforcement and return to his hometown. This decision serves an important narrative purpose, as it establishes that the coming conflict is not something he chooses. Instead, violence finds him despite his efforts to escape it. This opening section functions as the film's exposition. The audience learns who Hatcher is, what skills he possesses, and why he wants to leave his old life behind. The story presents him as a capable but weary man who hopes to reconnect with family and friends. These quieter moments are important because they create emotional stakes for everything that follows. After returning home, Hatcher reunites with people from his past, including his close friend Max Keller and other members of his community. For a brief period, the film allows viewers to believe that he may actually achieve the peaceful life he desires. However, this calm does not last long. The inciting incident occurs when Hatcher encounters members of a violent Jamaican drug gang that has begun operating in the area. At first, the confrontation appears relatively minor. Hatcher witnesses criminal behavior and intervenes to protect innocent people. In many action films, such an event would be resolved quickly. Instead, this moment triggers a chain reaction that drives the entire story forward. The gang is controlled by Screwface, a feared crime lord whose reputation extends far beyond ordinary criminal activity. Early references to Screwface create an atmosphere of mystery and fear. Characters speak about him with hesitation, suggesting that he possesses influence and power that make him especially dangerous. This gradual introduction of the villain is one of the film's strongest narrative decisions. Rather than immediately showing Screwface, the story builds anticipation. Audiences hear about him before fully seeing him, allowing imagination to fill in the details. This technique increases tension and helps establish him as a formidable threat. As Hatcher continues interfering with the gang's operations, the conflict escalates dramatically. The criminals begin targeting not only him but also his friends and family. This development marks the transition from the first act to the second act. The story is no longer about a retired agent encountering local crime. It becomes a deeply personal battle for survival. The attack on Hatcher's loved ones serves as the film's primary turning point. It transforms his motivation from self-preservation into vengeance and protection. The audience understands that retreat is no longer possible. Every act of violence committed by the gang pushes Hatcher further toward confrontation. The second act focuses on investigation, retaliation, and escalation. Hatcher begins using the skills he developed during his years as a DEA agent. He gathers information, identifies gang members, and systematically dismantles portions of Screwface's criminal network. This middle section follows a structure common to many action thrillers. The hero gradually weakens the enemy while simultaneously learning more about the true scope of the threat. However, Marked for Death distinguishes itself by making Screwface appear unusually resilient. Every victory achieved by Hatcher seems to reveal an even larger problem waiting behind it. The pacing during this section is particularly effective. Action sequences are distributed throughout the narrative rather than being concentrated entirely at the beginning or end. Each confrontation advances the story while increasing tension. Viewers never feel as though the action exists solely for spectacle. Instead, every fight and chase pushes the conflict forward. An important aspect of the film's structure is the way it creates uncertainty regarding Screwface himself. Rumors circulate suggesting that he possesses mystical abilities or supernatural protection. Some characters imply that he cannot be defeated through ordinary means. These suggestions add a layer of psychological tension that separates the film from more straightforward crime stories. Whether these supernatural elements are real or simply exaggerated legends remains deliberately unclear for much of the film. This ambiguity encourages audience speculation and strengthens Screwface's intimidating presence. As the story progresses toward its climax, Hatcher discovers that the gang's operations are larger and more sophisticated than initially believed. This revelation raises the stakes significantly. What began as a local conflict evolves into a battle against a widespread criminal organization. The third act begins when Hatcher decides to take the fight directly to Screwface. By this point, the hero has lost any hope of returning to normal life until the threat is eliminated. The story shifts from investigation to direct confrontation. The climax is built around a series of increasingly intense action sequences. Hatcher systematically fights his way through gang members, eliminating obstacles between himself and Screwface. The film uses these scenes to showcase Steven Seagal's martial arts abilities while maintaining narrative momentum. One of the most memorable aspects of the climax is the revelation involving Screwface's identity. The story introduces a twist that challenges assumptions made throughout the film. This unexpected development increases tension and forces Hatcher to adapt quickly. At first glance, Marked for Death appears to be a straightforward action film centered on revenge, crime, and violent confrontations. However, beneath its explosions, martial arts battles, and gunfights lies a collection of themes that give the story greater depth than many viewers initially realize. Like many memorable action films from the late 1980s and early 1990s, the movie uses its action-driven narrative to explore ideas about justice, loyalty, family, community, power, fear, and personal responsibility. While these themes are not always presented subtly, they contribute significantly to the film's lasting appeal and help explain why it remains one of the most respected entries in Steven Seagal's early career. One of the film's most important themes is the impossibility of escaping one's past. At the beginning of the story, John Hatcher has decided to leave behind his dangerous career as a DEA agent. He has spent years fighting drug traffickers and violent criminals, and he wants nothing more than a peaceful life. His retirement represents a desire to separate himself from the violence that has defined his existence. However, the story quickly demonstrates that the past cannot always be abandoned. Even after leaving law enforcement, Hatcher finds himself drawn back into conflict. The skills, experiences, and enemies associated with his former life continue to shape his future. This theme appears throughout the film as Hatcher repeatedly discovers that retirement does not erase the dangers he once faced. The idea that individuals cannot completely escape who they are forms the foundation of the entire narrative. Hatcher may want peace, but his sense of duty and his abilities make confrontation inevitable. In many ways, the story suggests that certain responsibilities remain with a person forever, regardless of how much they wish to move on. Closely connected to this concept is the theme of justice versus revenge. Initially, Hatcher's actions are motivated by a desire to protect innocent people and prevent criminal activity. As the story progresses and his loved ones become targets, however, his motivations begin to change. The attacks against his family and friends transform the conflict into something deeply personal. Hatcher is no longer simply enforcing the law, he is seeking retribution against those who have harmed the people he cares about. Throughout the film, the line between justice and revenge becomes increasingly blurred. This theme is common within action cinema, but Marked for Death presents it in a particularly direct manner. The audience understands why Hatcher wants revenge, yet the film also raises questions about how far a person should go in pursuing it. By the climax, his actions are driven by both a desire for justice and a deeply personal need to settle the score with Screwface. Another major theme is the importance of family and community. Unlike some action heroes who operate entirely alone, Hatcher is surrounded by people who care about him. His relationships provide emotional grounding and help establish what is at stake. The criminals do not merely threaten Hatcher as an individual, they threaten an entire network of family members, friends, and neighbors. This broader danger gives the story greater emotional weight. The audience understands that the battle is not solely about one man's survival, but about protecting a community from a force that seeks to dominate through fear and violence. The film repeatedly emphasizes loyalty among friends and family. Characters support one another even when doing so places them in danger. These relationships create a sharp contrast with Screwface's criminal organization, where loyalty is often maintained through intimidation and fear rather than genuine trust. Fear itself serves as another central theme. Throughout the film, Screwface maintains power largely because people are terrified of him. His reputation spreads long before many characters ever meet him. Stories about his brutality create an atmosphere in which fear becomes a weapon. This idea is particularly important because it demonstrates how criminal organizations often exert influence. Physical violence is only one aspect of their power. Psychological intimidation can be equally effective. Screwface understands this and cultivates a reputation that makes resistance seem impossible. Hatcher's struggle against Screwface can therefore be viewed as a battle against fear itself. By refusing to be intimidated, he weakens the foundation upon which the villain's authority is built. The film suggests that fear loses its power when individuals choose to confront it rather than submit to it. Power and corruption also play major roles in the narrative. Screwface's criminal empire is built upon the abuse of power. He uses violence, intimidation, and manipulation to control those around him. His actions demonstrate how power becomes destructive when exercised without morality or accountability. In contrast, Hatcher represents a different form of power. His strength comes from discipline, experience, and a commitment to protecting others. The conflict between these two characters can therefore be interpreted as a struggle between responsible and irresponsible uses of power. One seeks control for personal gain, while the other seeks to defend innocent people. This contrast reinforces the film's moral framework and helps the audience understand why Hatcher's victory is necessary. The movie also explores the theme of personal responsibility. Hatcher repeatedly attempts to avoid involvement in the growing conflict. Yet, each time he tries to step away, circumstances force him to reconsider. Eventually, he accepts that ignoring the problem will only allow it to worsen. This theme reflects a broader idea often found in action films: good people have a responsibility to act when confronted with evil. Hatcher possesses the skills necessary to challenge Screwface, and the story suggests that failing to use those skills would be morally wrong. Another fascinating theme involves identity and reputation. Screwface's reputation becomes almost as important as the character himself. Throughout much of the film, stories about him create an image that is larger than reality. People fear the legend as much as the man. Similarly, Hatcher carries the identity of a former DEA agent wherever he goes. Even after retirement, others continue to view him through that lens. Both characters are shaped by the reputations they have built over time. One of the reasons Marked for Death remains memorable decades after its release is its distinctive visual style. While many viewers remember the film for its action sequences, martial arts combat, and iconic villain, the movie's cinematography and overall visual presentation play a crucial role in shaping its atmosphere. Released in 1990, the film reflects the aesthetics of late 1980s and early 1990s action cinema, a period characterized by practical effects, gritty urban environments, dramatic lighting, and a commitment to visual realism. Every visual choice, from camera placement to color palette, helps reinforce the story's themes of danger, revenge, and escalating violence. The cinematography was designed to create a world that feels both realistic and threatening. Unlike many modern action films that rely heavily on digital effects and highly stylized imagery, Marked for Death grounds its story in recognizable locations and practical filmmaking techniques. The result is a movie that feels tangible and immediate, allowing audiences to become immersed in its dangerous world. One of the most noticeable aspects of the film's visual style is its use of urban environments. Much of the story takes place in residential neighborhoods, city streets, warehouses, bars, and industrial locations. These settings create a strong sense of authenticity that supports the narrative. The audience is not transported into a fantasy world or futuristic landscape. Instead, the danger unfolds in places that resemble ordinary American communities. This choice is significant because it makes the threat posed by Screwface and his gang feel more personal. Violence invades familiar spaces, and homes, businesses, and neighborhoods become battlegrounds. By placing extraordinary events within ordinary settings, the filmmakers heighten tension and emotional impact. Lighting plays a major role in establishing the film's mood. Many scenes take place at night or in dimly lit interiors. Shadows dominate large portions of the frame, creating a sense of uncertainty and danger. This approach reflects the influence of crime thrillers in neo-noir cinema, where darkness often symbolizes hidden threats and moral conflict. The filmmakers frequently use low-key lighting techniques. Rather than illuminating every detail equally, they allow parts of scenes to remain partially obscured. This visual strategy keeps viewers uneasy, as potential danger can seem to emerge from anywhere. It also enhances the mysterious nature of Screwface and his organization. Nighttime sequences are particularly effective. Streetlights, neon signs, headlights, and interior lamps create pools of light surrounded by darkness. These contrasts help direct the viewer's attention while reinforcing the feeling that the city contains hidden dangers. The visual environment mirrors Hatcher's journey as he descends deeper into a violent criminal underworld. Color also contributes significantly to the film's atmosphere. The palette is generally muted and grounded. Earth tones, grays, dark blues, and subdued colors dominate many scenes. Bright, vibrant colors are used sparingly. This restrained approach helps maintain a serious tone and prevents the film from feeling overly stylized. The darker palette reflects the story's themes. As Hatcher becomes increasingly involved in the conflict with Screwface, the visual world grows more threatening. The lack of bright colors reinforces the sense that hope and safety are gradually disappearing. By the climax, the audience feels fully immersed in a dangerous environment where violence can erupt at any moment. The camera work throughout the film emphasizes clarity and impact during action scenes. The filmmakers avoid excessive visual confusion. Modern action cinema often relies on rapid editing, shaky cameras, and extremely short shots. In contrast, Marked for Death allows viewers to clearly see the action unfolding. This approach is particularly important because of Steven Seagal's martial arts background. The filmmakers wanted audiences to appreciate the techniques being performed. Longer takes and carefully chosen camera angles showcase the physical choreography rather than obscuring it. Fight scenes frequently employ medium and wide shots that allow viewers to observe entire movements. Instead of cutting away every second, the camera remains focused on the performers. This decision enhances the credibility of the action because audiences can clearly see that Seagal is executing many of the techniques himself. The choreography itself becomes a visual signature. Seagal's Aikido-based combat style differs significantly from the fighting methods commonly seen in other action films of the era. Rather than relying on dramatic punches and kicks, many confrontations involve throws, joint locks, redirections, and rapid takedowns. The cinematography highlights these movements by maintaining visual clarity. The audience can follow each technique from beginning to end. This creates a sense of realism while also establishing Hatcher as a uniquely skilled protagonist. The film also makes effective use of close-ups during moments of tension. The camera frequently focuses on facial expressions, allowing audiences to observe fear, anger, determination, and intimidation. Close-ups are particularly important in depicting Screwface. Basil Wallace's performance relies heavily on presence and intensity. The filmmakers use close framing to emphasize his eyes, facial expressions, and confident demeanor. These shots contribute to the character's intimidating reputation. Even when he is not physically threatening someone, the camera suggests that danger is always present. The visual contrast between Hatcher and Screwface represents another important element of the film's design. Hatcher is often shown in relatively clean, straightforward environments. His appearance is simple and practical. Screwface, by contrast, is frequently surrounded by darkness, followers, and symbols of criminal power. These visual distinctions reinforce their opposing roles within the story. Hatcher represents order and protection, while Screwface represents chaos and fear. The cinematography consistently emphasizes this contrast through composition, lighting, and staging. The film's practical effects also contribute significantly to its visual identity. Explosions, broken glass, gunfire impacts, and physical injuries were created using traditional techniques rather than computer-generated imagery. As a result, the action feels grounded and believable. While Marked for Death is often remembered for its brutal action scenes, Steven Seagal's martial arts combat, and the unforgettable villain Screwface, one of the film's most underrated strengths is its soundtrack and sound design. Audio plays a critical role in shaping the movie's atmosphere, transforming what could have been a standard action thriller into a more immersive and memorable cinematic experience. From its musical score to its use of reggae influences, environmental sounds, weapon effects, and fight choreography audio, the film demonstrates how sound can elevate tension, define character, and reinforce storytelling. The soundtrack of Marked for Death is particularly notable because it blends traditional action film scoring with cultural influences that reflect the Jamaican criminal underworld. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, many action films relied on orchestral scores combined with electronic synthesizers designed to create excitement, suspense, and dramatic momentum. Marked for Death follows this tradition while incorporating additional musical elements that help establish its unique identity. The score was composed by James Newton Howard, who would later become one of Hollywood's most respected and successful film composers. At the time of Marked for Death, Howard was already building an impressive reputation for creating emotionally effective and memorable scores across multiple genres. His work demonstrated a strong understanding of how music could support narrative and character development without overwhelming the story. Howard's score emphasizes tension and anticipation, rather than constantly pushing aggressive action themes. Much of the music is designed to create unease. This approach is important because the film often relies on suspense before violence erupts. The audience must feel that danger is approaching long before punches are thrown or guns are fired. Throughout the film, Howard uses low, ominous musical cues to establish a sense of threat. These cues frequently accompany references to Screwface or his criminal organization. Even before the villain appears on screen, The music signals that something dangerous is present. This technique helps build anticipation and strengthens Screwface's intimidating reputation. One of the most effective aspects of the score is its restraint. Many action films of the era filled nearly every scene with music. Marked for Death often allows quieter moments to breathe. This restraint makes dramatic musical passages more powerful when they do occur. By avoiding constant sound, the film gives audiences space to absorb tension and focus on character interactions. The incorporation of Jamaican musical influences is another significant element of the soundtrack. Since the story revolves around a Jamaican drug gang, the filmmakers use reggae-inspired sounds and rhythms to establish cultural identity and atmosphere. These musical choices provide texture and authenticity while distinguishing the film from other action movies of the period. Music associated with Screwface and his organization often contains rhythmic and tonal qualities reflecting Caribbean influences, reinforcing a sense of place even within urban American settings. The audience is constantly reminded that this criminal network has roots extending beyond the local community. This blending of musical traditions contributes to the film's uniqueness. Rather than relying exclusively on generic action themes, the soundtrack incorporates sounds that reinforce narrative and cultural context. As a result, the music becomes part of the storytelling process rather than simply background accompaniment. The action sequences provide some of the score's most memorable moments. During fights and confrontations, the music becomes more energetic and aggressive, intensifying the impact of the on-screen violence. Percussion frequently takes center stage, driving momentum and heightening excitement. Fast rhythms mirror the pace of the action, helping viewers feel the urgency of each confrontation. However, the score rarely overwhelms the physical combat. The filmmakers understood that Steven Seagal's martial arts techniques were a major selling point of the movie. As a result, the music often supports rather than dominates these sequences. Audiences are able to hear impacts, movements, and environmental sounds clearly, preserving the realism of the action. Sound design plays an equally important role throughout the film. Every punch, kick, throw, and collision is carefully enhanced through audio effects. Action films frequently exaggerate these sounds to increase their impact, and Marked for Death is no exception. The result is a heightened sense of physicality that makes the combat feel more intense. When Hatcher executes an Aikido throw or joint lock, the accompanying sound effects emphasize the force of the movement. Bones appear to crack, bodies slam into surfaces, and impacts resonate throughout the environment. These sounds help communicate the effectiveness of Hatcher's techniques and reinforce his reputation as a formidable fighter. Gunfire also receives significant attention within the sound design. Each weapon possesses a distinct audio signature, helping viewers differentiate between the various firearms used throughout the story. The sharp reports of gunshots create sudden bursts of tension, particularly during ambushes and surprise attacks. Explosions and environmental destruction further contribute to the film's audio landscape. Broken glass, collapsing structures, and vehicle impacts are rendered with convincing detail. Because the movie relies heavily on practical effects, the sound design enhances the realism of these moments, making them feel substantial and dangerous. Environmental sounds deserve special attention as well. The filmmakers frequently use ambient noise to establish location and mood. City streets contain traffic, distant sirens, conversations, and general urban activity. Residential neighborhoods feature subtler sounds that create a sense of normal life. These environmental details help ground the film in reality and make the settings feel lived in. The contrast between peaceful ambient environments and sudden violence is particularly effective. Moments of calm are often interrupted by explosions, gunfire, or attacks. This contrast increases shock value and reminds audiences that danger can emerge at any time. When Marked for Death was released in 1990, it entered a highly competitive action movie marketplace. The late 1980s and early 1990s represented one of the most successful periods in the history of the action genre. Audiences had become accustomed to seeing major stars such as Steven Seagal, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chuck Norris, and others headline films centered on revenge, crime, military conflicts, and larger-than-life heroes. In such a crowded environment, Earning audience attention was not always easy. Yet, despite mixed critical reviews, Marked for Death became a commercial success and developed a reputation that has endured for decades. The film's reception revealed a growing divide between professional critics and general audiences. This was not unusual for action films during the period. Critics often focus on originality, dramatic depth, and artistic ambition, while audiences primarily seek entertainment, excitement, memorable characters, and satisfying action sequences. Marked for Death became a perfect example of this difference in perspective. Upon release, many critics acknowledged the movie's effectiveness as an action thriller but questioned its narrative complexity. Several reviews noted that the plot followed a familiar revenge formula already seen in countless action films. Critics pointed out that the story of a retired law enforcement officer being forced back into action after criminals threaten his loved ones was not particularly innovative. From a purely narrative standpoint, these observations were accurate. The basic structure of the film was indeed familiar. However, many reviewers underestimated how effectively the movie executed this formula. Audiences were less concerned with originality and more interested in whether the film delivered excitement, suspense, and memorable confrontations. In those areas, many viewers believed the movie succeeded. One of the most common criticisms involved the screenplay's simplicity. Some reviewers argued that character development was limited and that certain supporting characters existed primarily to advance the plot. Critics often compared the movie to more sophisticated crime dramas and found it lacking in emotional complexity. Yet many audience members viewed the straightforward storytelling as one of the film's strengths. The movie wastes very little time on unnecessary subplots or lengthy exposition. Viewers immediately understand the conflict, the stakes, and the motivations driving the characters. This direct approach contributes to the film's fast pacing and accessibility. Steven Seagal's performance generated particularly divided reactions. Supporters praised his physical presence, martial arts skills, and ability to project confidence and authority. They viewed him as a refreshing alternative to more traditional action stars. His calm demeanor and efficient fighting style helped distinguish him from many contemporaries. Critics, however, often questioned his acting range. Some reviewers argued that Seagal relied too heavily on a stoic screen persona and displayed limited emotional variation throughout the film. This criticism would follow him throughout much of his career. Even many fans acknowledged that his greatest strengths lay in action choreography and screen presence rather than dramatic performance. Despite these criticisms, Seagal's popularity continued to grow during this period. For many moviegoers, his martial arts abilities more than compensated for any perceived acting limitations. Marked for Death reinforced his image as an unstoppable action hero and contributed significantly to his commercial success. Perhaps the most universally praised aspect of the film was its villain. Basil Wallace's portrayal of Screwface received attention from both critics and audiences. Even reviewers who disliked other aspects of the movie frequently acknowledged that Screwface was a memorable antagonist. The character's combination of intimidation, unpredictability, and mystical overtones helped him stand out from the more generic villains commonly seen in action films. Wallace's performance added energy and personality to every scene in which he appeared. As a result, Screwface became one of the most frequently cited highlights of the film. Many audience members left theaters remembering the villain as much as the hero. This is relatively uncommon within the action genre, where antagonists often exist solely to provide obstacles for the protagonist. Screwface possesses a distinctive identity that helped elevate the movie above many of its competitors. The action sequences also received generally positive reactions. Viewers appreciated the practical stunt work, martial arts choreography, and physical realism of the fight scenes. During an era before widespread computer-generated imagery, audiences valued action that appeared authentic and dangerous. Critics frequently acknowledged the technical competence of these sequences, even when criticizing other aspects of the film. The combat choreography showcases Aikido expertise and provides a unique visual style compared to other action films of the time. Commercially, Marked for Death performed very well, The movie achieved strong box office results and became one of the most successful entries in Steven Seagal's early career. Its financial performance demonstrated that audiences were enthusiastic about his brand of action filmmaking. The success was particularly significant because it confirmed that Seagal's popularity was not limited to a single breakout film. After Above the Law and Hard to Kill, some observers questioned whether he could sustain long-term success. Marked for Death provided a clear answer by becoming another profitable hit. The film's performance in the home video market further enhanced its reputation. During the early 1990s, VHS rentals represented a major source of revenue and audience exposure. Marked for Death became a popular rental title, introducing the movie to viewers who had not seen it in theaters. This success helped transform the film into a cult favorite. Many people discovered it through video stores, cable television broadcasts, and later DVD releases. As a result, its audience continued growing long after its theatrical run ended. More than 3 decades after its release, Marked for Death remains one of the most recognizable action films of the early 1990s. While it was not a groundbreaking cinematic masterpiece in the traditional sense, its impact on the action genre, Steven Seagal's career, and the broader culture of action filmmaking has proven surprisingly durable. The movie occupies a unique place in film history because it represents both the peak of a particular style of action cinema and a significant chapter in the evolution of the action hero archetype. Its legacy can be seen not only in later films but also in how audiences continue to discuss and revisit it today. Perhaps the most immediate aspect of the film's legacy is its importance within Steven Seagal's career. By the time Marked for Death was released in 1990, Seagal had already enjoyed success with Above the Law and Hard to Kill. However, Marked for Death helped confirm that he was not simply a temporary trend or a one-film phenomenon. The movie demonstrated that audiences were consistently interested in his style of action filmmaking. Its commercial success strengthened Seagal's standing within Hollywood and helped pave the way for future projects. In many ways, Marked for Death represented the completion of his rise from martial arts instructor to major action star. Studios now viewed him as a reliable box office draw capable of carrying large-scale productions. For many fans, the movie remains one of the defining examples of Seagal at his peak. Discussions about his best films almost always include Marked for Death alongside Above the Law, Hard to Kill, and Under Siege. Even viewers who are critical of his later career often acknowledge that this period represented the height of his effectiveness as a screen presence. The film also helped establish a template that would appear repeatedly throughout Seagal's future projects. The basic formula of a retired or reluctant hero being forced back into action became a recurring element in many of his films. Audiences responded positively to the combination of personal stakes, martial arts combat, and revenge-driven storytelling. As a result, numerous later action films featuring Seagal incorporated similar narrative structures. While not every film achieved the same level of success, Marked for Death helped define what audiences expected from a Steven Seagal movie. Beyond Seagal's career, the film influenced the portrayal of martial arts within mainstream American action cinema. During the 1980s, martial arts films often existed as a separate category from traditional Hollywood action movies. Marked for Death contributed to the growing integration of martial arts techniques into mainstream action storytelling. The film demonstrated that audiences appreciated realistic hand-to-hand combat alongside more conventional action elements such as gunfights and explosions. Its success reinforced the idea that martial arts choreography could serve as a major attraction even within films aimed at broad audiences. This trend continued throughout the 1990s and beyond, as many action stars and filmmakers increasingly emphasized close-quarters combat as an essential component of their movies. While Marked for Death was not solely responsible for this shift, it helped popularize the approach during a particularly important period in the genre's development. Another major element of the film's legacy is the character of Screwface. Among action movie villains, Screwface occupies a unique position and is portrayed by Basil Wallace. The character remains one of the most memorable antagonists of the era. Many action films feature villains who are quickly forgotten after the credits roll. Screwface is different. His combination of brutality, charisma, mysticism, and unpredictability helped him stand out from the countless drug lords and criminal masterminds appearing in action cinema at the time. Decades later, fans still reference the character when discussing memorable movie villains. The popularity of Screwface illustrates an important aspect of the film's influence. Successful action movies often depend on the quality of their antagonists. A hero can only be as compelling as the threat he faces. By creating a villain who was both frightening and distinctive, Mark for Death demonstrated the importance of investing creative effort into antagonist development. Many later action films attempted to replicate this formula by giving villains more personality, mythology, and screen presence. While not all succeeded, the influence of memorable antagonists such as Screwface can be seen throughout the genre. The movie's climactic twist also contributed to its reputation. Without revealing details unnecessarily, the final revelations involving Screwface became one of the film's most discussed aspects. Fans frequently cite the ending as one of the reasons the movie remains entertaining to revisit. This willingness to incorporate unexpected narrative elements helps separate Mark for Death from more formulaic action movies. While the overall story follows familiar conventions, moments like these demonstrate that audiences could still be surprised within an established genre framework. The film's influence expanded significantly through the home video market. During the 1990s, VHS rentals played an enormous role in determining a movie's long-term cultural impact. Mark for Death became a popular rental title and was frequently broadcast on cable television. As a result, generations of viewers encountered the film outside of theaters. Many action fans first discovered it while browsing video store shelves or watching late-night television broadcasts. This continued exposure allowed a movie to reach a much larger audience than its theatrical release alone might have achieved. The rise of DVD, Blu-ray, and streaming services further extended the film's lifespan. Unlike some action movies that faded into obscurity, Mark for Death remained easily accessible. This accessibility allowed new audiences to discover the movie decades after its original release. Within action movie communities, the film has become something of a cult classic. Fans often celebrate its practical stunt work, memorable dialogue, and straightforward storytelling. Internet discussions, retrospective reviews, and genre rankings frequently include the movie among the most entertaining action films of its period. One of the most fascinating aspects of Mark for Death is how audiences have interpreted and responded to the film over the decades. While critics often evaluate movies through technical, artistic, or narrative standards, audiences tend to connect with films on a more emotional and personal level. The lasting popularity of the film demonstrates that it resonated with viewers in ways that extend beyond its plot and action sequences. Different generations have found different reasons to appreciate the film, and those interpretations have evolved as cultural attitudes and cinematic tastes have changed. When the movie was first released in 1990, audiences were living through a period marked by concerns about crime, drugs, gang violence, and social instability. News programs frequently reported on the growing influence of drug trafficking organizations and their impact on local communities. Many viewers saw these issues reflected in the story of John Hatcher and his battle against Screwface's organization. For these audiences, the film provided a sense of empowerment. The idea of a capable individual standing up against violent criminals appealed to viewers who felt frustrated by real-world problems that often seemed impossible to solve. Hatcher represented a fantasy of direct action and decisive justice. He was a character who could confront threats head-on and achieve results when institutions appeared ineffective or overwhelmed. Many viewers identified strongly with this aspect of the story. They did not necessarily see Hatcher as a realistic figure, but rather as a symbol of strength and determination. His willingness to protect his family, friends, and community resonated with audiences who valued responsibility, loyalty, and personal courage. The film also appealed to viewers because of its straightforward moral structure. Unlike many modern thrillers that emphasize ambiguity and complex ethical dilemmas, Mark for Death presents a world in which good and evil are relatively easy to identify. Hatcher represents protection and justice, while Screwface represents fear, violence, and exploitation. For many audience members, This clarity was satisfying. Action movie fans of the early 1990s were particularly drawn to Steven Seagal's unique screen persona. At the time, audiences were already familiar with larger-than-life heroes such as Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. Seagal offered something different. His characters often appeared calm, disciplined, and highly skilled rather than loud or flamboyant. Many viewers interpreted this as confidence rather than arrogance. Hatcher's ability to remain composed under pressure became one of his most appealing traits. Audiences admired the idea of someone who could maintain control even when surrounded by chaos. The martial arts component of the film also generated strong audience reactions. Many viewers had never seen Aikido-based combat presented so prominently in a mainstream action movie. Hatcher's fighting style appeared efficient and practical, creating a sense of authenticity that distinguished him from other action heroes. Fans frequently described the fight scenes as believable, despite the film's exaggerated action elements. This perception contributed significantly to the movie's popularity. Screwface generated some of the strongest audience responses in the entire film. Viewers often remember the villain as vividly as the hero, which is relatively rare in action cinema where antagonists are frequently overshadowed by protagonists. Audiences were fascinated by Screwface because he felt unpredictable. Throughout much of the story, viewers are never entirely certain what he might do next. His reputation, mysterious background, and intimidating presence create a sense of genuine danger. Many audience members interpret him as one of the most frightening villains of the era because his threats seem to extend beyond ordinary criminal behavior. The mystical elements associated with Screwface also sparked considerable discussion. Some viewers embraced these aspects as intriguing additions to the story, while others viewed them as symbolic rather than literal. This ambiguity encouraged audience interpretation and contributed to the film's long-term appeal. For some viewers, Screwface represented evil in its purest form. His influence spread through fear, intimidation, and violence. Others saw him as a representation of broader social anxieties about organized crime and perceived loss of control within communities affected by drug trafficking. The film's emphasis on family and friendship also resonated strongly with audiences. Many viewers connected emotionally with Hatcher's determination to protect those he loved. The attacks on his family and friends transformed the story from a simple crime thriller into a personal struggle that felt relatable despite extraordinary circumstances. Audience reactions frequently highlighted these relationships as a major source of emotional investment. Viewers wanted Hatcher to succeed not merely because he was a hero, but because they understood what he was fighting to protect. As years passed and the film became available through home video, cable television, DVD, and streaming platforms, new generations began discovering it. These younger viewers often approached the movie differently than those who saw it during its original release. For many modern audiences, Mark for Death serves as a window into a particular era of action filmmaking. They see it as a representation of early 1990s cinema, complete with practical effects, straightforward storytelling, and larger-than-life characters. The movie's nostalgic value has become an important part of its appeal. Older fans often revisit the film because it reminds them of a specific period in their lives. Watching it can evoke memories of video rental stores, cable television marathons, and a time when action films occupied a dominant place in popular culture. These nostalgic connections help explain why the movie continues attracting loyal audiences. Younger viewers, meanwhile, often appreciate the film for reasons different from its original audience. Although Mark for Death is primarily remembered as an action thriller filled with martial arts combat, gunfights, and explosive confrontations, its effectiveness depends heavily on its characters. The action works because audiences become invested in the people involved. While the movie does not present character development with the same complexity found in dramatic films, it nevertheless offers meaningful arcs, motivations, and relationships that drive the story forward. The growth of John Hatcher, the menace of Screwface, and the loyalty of supporting characters all contribute significantly to the film's emotional impact. At the center of the story is John Hatcher, portrayed by Steven Seagal. Hatcher begins the film as a man exhausted by violence. After years working as a Drug Enforcement Administration agent, he has witnessed the worst aspects of the criminal world. He has seen lives destroyed, families torn apart, and communities damaged by drug trafficking and organized crime. The opening establishes Hatcher as emotionally worn down. Unlike many action heroes who actively seek danger, he wants to escape it. His decision to retire is not motivated by fear but by a desire for peace. He has spent years fighting battles that seem endless, and he hopes to reclaim a normal life. This desire for normalcy forms the foundation of his character arc. At the beginning of the story, Hatcher believes he can leave violence behind simply by walking away from his career. He imagines that distance and retirement will allow him to start over. However, the narrative gradually forces him to confront a difficult reality. Certain responsibilities cannot be abandoned. His skills, experiences, and sense of justice remain part of who he is. The conflict with Screwface ultimately teaches him that he cannot ignore threats when innocent people are in danger. Throughout the film, Hatcher evolves from a man seeking peace into a protector willing to embrace confrontation when necessary. Importantly, he does not enjoy violence. Every action he takes is presented as a response to escalating threats rather than a pursuit of personal glory. This distinction separates him from many traditional action heroes. Hatcher's motivation is rooted in duty rather than ego. He fights because circumstances leave him no alternative, and as a result, audiences often perceive him as more relatable and morally grounded. His arc reaches its conclusion during the final confrontation with Screwface. By this point, Hatcher has accepted that protecting his loved ones requires decisive action. He no longer attempts to avoid conflict. Instead, he fully commits himself to eliminating the threat facing his community. The resolution does not suggest that Hatcher enjoys what he has become. Rather, it reinforces the idea that courage sometimes requires individuals to do difficult things for the sake of others. His journey is therefore one of acceptance rather than transformation into an entirely different person. The film's primary antagonist, Screwface, represents a very different type of character arc. Unlike Hatcher, Screwface does not undergo meaningful personal growth. Instead, he functions as a force of escalation whose influence expands throughout the story. What makes Screwface compelling is the gradual revelation of his character. Early in the film, audiences learn about him through rumors and second-hand accounts. People speak his name with fear and hesitation. This approach allows the filmmakers to build anticipation before he appears on screen. When viewers finally meet Screwface, he largely fulfills the expectations created by these stories. He is ruthless, charismatic, and intimidating. His confidence stems from a belief that he is untouchable, and this arrogance becomes one of his defining traits. Screwface views fear as the ultimate source of power. He controls people not only through violence but also through psychological intimidation. His reputation often accomplishes more than physical force alone. This understanding of power makes him a particularly dangerous adversary. As the story progresses, Screwface becomes increasingly obsessed with destroying Hatcher. What begins as a practical effort to eliminate opposition evolves into a personal vendetta, and this obsession ultimately contributes to his downfall. The villain's inability to adapt serves as his primary weakness. While Hatcher grows and accepts new responsibilities, Screwface remains trapped by his own arrogance. He consistently underestimates his opponent and overestimates his own invincibility. This contrast between growth and stagnation forms one of the film's most important character dynamics. Hatcher succeeds because he evolves, while Screwface fails because he refuses to change. Max Keller, portrayed by Keith David, serves as one of the story's most important supporting characters. Max functions as both friend and ally, providing emotional support and practical assistance throughout the narrative. Unlike Hatcher, Max has not spent years attempting to distance himself from conflict. He remains deeply connected to his community and understands the dangers posed by criminal organizations. His perspective often reinforces the seriousness of the threat facing everyone involved, and his loyalty becomes one of his defining characteristics. Even when the situation grows increasingly dangerous, he refuses to abandon his friend. This unwavering support strengthens the emotional foundation of the story. The friendship between Max and Hatcher feels genuine because both characters share mutual respect. Their relationship is not based solely on plot convenience. Instead, It reflects years of trust and shared experiences. Many audience members appreciate Max because he provides balance to Hatcher's personality. While Hatcher is often calm and reserved, Max displays greater emotional openness and energy. Their contrasting temperaments create a dynamic partnership that enhances many scenes. Leslie, portrayed by Joanna Pacula, plays a smaller but still significant role in the narrative. She represents the peaceful future Hatcher hopes to build, and her presence reminds audiences that the protagonist is fighting not only against something, but also for something. Leslie's relationship with Hatcher introduces vulnerability into his character. While Mark for Death is primarily celebrated for its action sequences, martial arts choreography, and memorable villain, its costume and set design also play a crucial role in establishing atmosphere, defining characters, and supporting themes. These visual elements often operate subtly in the background, yet they significantly influence how audiences perceive the world of the film. One of the most important goals of the costume design is to reinforce the contrast between John Hatcher and the criminal organization he opposes. From the beginning, Hatcher's clothing communicates simplicity, practicality, and restraint. Unlike many action heroes of the era dressed in flashy outfits or military-style uniforms, Hatcher typically wears ordinary civilian clothing such as jackets, jeans, casual shirts, and dark-colored garments that allow him to blend naturally into his environment. These choices serve several purposes. First, they emphasize that Hatcher is no longer an active law enforcement officer. He is attempting to live as a normal citizen rather than a professional crime fighter. Second, his clothing reflects his personality. Hatcher is not interested in attracting attention. He is disciplined, focused, and practical. His wardrobe avoids unnecessary decoration because he values function over appearance. This visual simplicity helps audiences immediately understand who he is. The costume design also reinforces Hatcher's role as a protector rather than a celebrity-like hero. He looks like someone who could exist in the real world. This relatability helps viewers connect with him and strengthens the film's grounded tone. As the conflict escalates, Hatcher's appearance changes subtly. While he never adopts a radically different style, his clothing increasingly reflects the dangerous situations he faces. Darker garments, heavier jackets, and more utilitarian outfits become common as he moves deeper into confrontation with Screwface's organization. This progression mirrors his character arc. The man who hoped for a peaceful retirement gradually re-embraces the responsibilities and dangers associated with his past. The costume design communicates this evolution without requiring explicit dialogue. In contrast, Screwface's wardrobe is designed to project authority, menace, and individuality. Screwface, portrayed by Basil Wallace, frequently wears distinctive clothing that sets him apart from ordinary gang members. His outfits often incorporate bold colors, accessories, and stylistic elements that draw attention to his presence. The filmmakers clearly intended audiences to recognize him immediately whenever he appears on screen. Even before he speaks, viewers understand that he occupies a position of power within the criminal hierarchy. His wardrobe functions almost like a visual signature. Screwface is not a villain who hides in the shadows out of fear. He enjoys commanding attention and cultivating an intimidating reputation. The contrast between Hatcher's understated clothing and Screwface's expressive style visually reinforces their ideological opposition. Hatcher seeks stability and protection, while Screwface seeks dominance and influence. Their costumes communicate these differences before either character says a word. The members of Screwface's gang are also distinguished through costume design. Many wear clothing associated with street culture and criminal identity of the late 1980s and early 1990s. Their appearance helps establish group cohesion while also differentiating them from ordinary residents of the community. At the same time, variations in clothing prevent them from appearing identical, creating the impression of a real organization composed of individuals rather than generic background figures. This attention to detail enhances the film's realism. Leslie's wardrobe serves a different narrative function. Her clothing emphasizes normalcy, stability, and emotional warmth, She often appears in softer colors and less threatening environments than many other characters. These choices help establish her as part of the peaceful life Hatcher hopes to preserve. Costume design in action films often relies on visual shorthand to communicate character traits quickly, and Leslie's appearance immediately signals that she belongs to a different world than the criminals threatening the community. Her wardrobe reinforces what is at stake if Hatcher fails. Keith David's character, Max Keller, occupies an interesting middle ground. His clothing reflects his connection to the community while also suggesting readiness to confront danger when necessary. He appears comfortable in his environment yet capable of adapting when circumstances become threatening. These distinctions among the main characters demonstrate how costume design contributes to storytelling. Every major figure possesses a visual identity that supports their narrative role. Beyond costumes, the film's set design and locations play an equally important role. One of the film's greatest strengths is its use of authentic urban environments. Rather than relying heavily on studio-built sets, the production frequently utilizes real neighborhoods, streets, businesses, and industrial locations. This decision creates a strong sense of realism, making the events feel like they could occur in an actual community rather than an artificial movie world. The residential neighborhoods featured throughout the story are particularly important. These areas symbolize normal life and community stability, representing the world Hatcher is trying to protect. By placing violent confrontations within these familiar spaces, the filmmakers heighten emotional tension. When gang violence invades homes, streets, and businesses, it becomes clear that the threat extends beyond individual victims and the entire community is under attack. The set design therefore becomes a storytelling tool that reinforces the film's themes. The screenplay of Mark for Death is one of the film's most important foundations. While the movie is often remembered for its explosive action, martial arts combat, and memorable villain, none of these elements would have the same impact without a script capable of creating tension, establishing character motivations, and maintaining momentum. The dialogue and screenplay reflect the storytelling style that defined much of the action genre during the late 1980s and early 1990s. Rather than focusing on complex philosophical discussions or intricate narrative structures, the script prioritizes clarity, efficiency, and emotional immediacy. Written by Michael Graves and Mark Victor, the screenplay follows a relatively straightforward structure, but it succeeds because it understands exactly what kind of story it wants to tell. The writers recognize that audiences are coming to see a tense action thriller, and they construct a narrative built around escalating conflict, memorable confrontations, and clearly defined stakes. One of the screenplay's greatest strengths is its economy. Very little dialogue feels unnecessary. Scenes are concise and purposeful, and characters communicate essential information without becoming trapped in lengthy exposition. This approach helps maintain pacing and ensures the story never loses momentum from its opening moments. The script establishes John Hatcher as a man exhausted by violence. The dialogue in these early moments is restrained and practical. Hatcher does not deliver lengthy speeches about his past experiences or emotional struggles. Instead, the audience learns about him through short conversations and his reactions to events. This writing style reflects the character's personality. Hatcher is not a man who enjoys discussing his feelings. He is disciplined, controlled, and reserved. The screenplay understands this and avoids forcing the character into conversations that would feel unnatural. Many action films struggle with exposition because they attempt to explain every detail of the plot through dialogue. Mark for Death generally avoids this problem. Information is delivered gradually through interactions, allowing viewers to piece together the situation without feeling overwhelmed by explanation. The script also excels at establishing conflict quickly. Within a relatively short time, audiences understand who Hatcher is, why he is retired, and what kind of threat is emerging within the community. This efficiency allows the film to begin escalating tension almost immediately. Another notable aspect of the screenplay is its use of dialogue to build Screwface's reputation before the character fully enters the story. Throughout the early portions of the film, characters speak about him with fear and caution. These conversations serve an important narrative purpose. Rather than introducing the villain immediately, The script creates anticipation. Viewers hear stories and warnings about Screwface long before they spend significant time with him. This technique allows the audience's imagination to contribute to the character's mystique. By the time Screwface appears, expectations have already been firmly established. The screenplay effectively transforms him into a legendary figure within the story's world. This makes his eventual introduction more impactful and helps explain why the character remains memorable decades later. The dialogue given to Screwface is one of the strongest elements of the screenplay. His lines are often direct, threatening, and confident. Unlike some villains who rely on excessive speeches, Screwface communicates power through concise statements and controlled delivery. The script allows him to project authority without constantly explaining himself. This restraint makes him more intimidating, as viewers sense that he does not need to prove his power through words alone. His confidence suggests genuine danger. Many fans remember specific exchanges involving Screwface because they reveal his personality so effectively. The dialogue emphasizes his arrogance, unpredictability, and belief in his own superiority. These qualities help transform him from a generic criminal into a distinctive antagonist. John Hatcher's dialogue functions differently. His lines are typically practical and action-oriented. He rarely engages in elaborate conversations. Instead, he speaks when necessary and often allows his actions to communicate his intentions. This writing approach aligns perfectly with Steven Seagal's screen persona during this period. Seagal's most effective performances often relied on calm confidence rather than emotional intensity. The screenplay understands this and crafts dialogue that complements his strengths as a performer. One of the most important characteristics of the script is its commitment to maintaining tension. Conversations frequently contain an undercurrent of threat or uncertainty. Even seemingly ordinary exchanges can feel dangerous because the audience understands that violence may erupt at any moment. This tension is especially evident during confrontations between Hatcher and members of Screwface's organization. The dialogue often serves as a precursor to physical conflict. Characters test one another, issue warnings, or attempt intimidation before action begins. These verbal exchanges help make the eventual confrontations more satisfying, rather than appearing random. The violence emerges naturally from escalating hostility. The script uses dialogue to build anticipation before delivering action. The screenplay also demonstrates a strong understanding of supporting characters and their role within the narrative. Keith David's character, Max Keller, receives dialogue that highlights his loyalty, humor, and confidence. Max often provides energy that contrasts with Hatcher's more reserved personality. This difference creates a stronger dynamic between the characters. Their conversations feel natural because they reflect distinct perspectives and temperaments. The screenplay avoids making every character sound identical, which helps create a more believable world. Humor is present throughout the script, though it is generally subtle. Unlike action comedies that rely heavily on jokes, Mark for Death uses occasional moments of humor to provide relief from escalating tension. These lighter exchanges help humanize the characters and prevent the film from becoming overwhelmingly grim. The humor often emerges through character interactions rather than elaborate comedic situations. The marketing campaign for Mark for Death played a crucial role in transforming the film from another action release into one of the most successful entries in Steven Seagal's early career. Released in 1990, the movie entered a highly competitive entertainment marketplace where action films dominated theaters. Studios understood that audiences had numerous options, and successful promotion often determined whether a film would become a box office hit or quickly disappear from public attention. At the time, the film industry operated very differently from today. There were no social media platforms, viral marketing campaigns, streaming services, or digital advertising algorithms. Studios relied heavily on theatrical trailers, television commercials, newspaper advertisements, magazine coverage, radio promotion, and eye-catching posters. Mark for Death benefited from a marketing strategy focused on a simple but powerful message. Steven Seagal was becoming one of Hollywood's premier action stars, and this film would showcase him at his most dangerous. One of the most important aspects of the movie's marketing was its timing. By 1990, Steven Seagal was no longer an unknown performer. His first film, Above the Law, had introduced audiences to his unique martial arts style, while Hard to Kill had strengthened his growing popularity. The marketing team recognized that Seagal himself had become a major selling point. As a result, much of the promotional material focused directly on him. Unlike some films that emphasize plot details or supporting characters, Mark for Death was marketed primarily as a Steven Seagal event. Posters, trailers, and advertisements frequently highlighted his image, his fighting abilities, and his reputation as an unstoppable action hero. This approach reflected a common strategy in action cinema during the late 1980s and early 1990s, where audiences often chose films based on the star rather than a story. Names such as Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chuck Norris, and Steven Seagal functioned almost like brands. Viewers knew what kind of experience they would receive simply by recognizing the actor's name. The film's title itself became an effective marketing tool. Mark for Death is short, memorable, and immediately communicates danger. Action movie titles during this era frequently relied on strong, dramatic language designed to capture attention quickly. The phrase Mark for Death suggests inevitability, conflict, and high stakes, making it an ideal promotional title. Movie posters represented one of the most important marketing assets of the period. The theatrical poster for Mark for Death followed many conventions associated with successful action films. Steven Seagal was positioned prominently, often shown in a confident stance that emphasized strength and determination. The imagery communicated exactly what audiences could expect. Weapons, dramatic lighting, intense facial expressions, and dark visual tones all reinforced the film's identity as a serious action thriller. Potential viewers could understand the genre within seconds of seeing the poster. The color palette used in promotional materials also contributed to the film's effectiveness. Dark blues, blacks, reds, and shadow-heavy imagery created a sense of danger and suspense. These visual choices aligned closely with the film's tone and helped establish a consistent brand identity across advertising platforms. Trailers played an equally important role. During the early 1990s, theatrical trailers were among the most influential marketing tools available. They appeared before other films in theaters and were frequently broadcast on television. The trailer for Mark for Death emphasized action above all else. Viewers were shown martial arts sequences, explosions, gunfights, and confrontations between Hatcher and Screwface. The goal was clear: convince audiences that the film would deliver excitement and intensity. Importantly, the trailer avoided revealing too much of the story. Rather than explaining every plot detail, it focused on creating curiosity. Audiences learned that Hatcher was facing a dangerous criminal organization, but many narrative twists were kept hidden. This balance between information and mystery encouraged viewers to buy tickets to learn more. Television advertising expanded the film's reach significantly. Short promotional spots aired during programs likely to attract action movie fans. These advertisements condensed the film's appeal into brief, impactful presentations featuring rapid editing, dramatic narration, and memorable imagery. Because television commercials were limited in length, marketers focused heavily on Seagal's physical abilities and the threat posed by Screwface. The objective was to create immediate excitement and leave viewers wanting more. Entertainment magazines and newspapers also contributed to the promotional campaign. Interviews with Steven Seagal, director Dwight H. Little, and other cast members helped generate additional publicity. These articles frequently emphasized Seagal's martial arts background, portraying him as an authentic action star rather than simply an actor playing a tough character. This authenticity became a major marketing advantage. Audiences believed that Seagal possessed real combat skills, which added credibility to the action sequences. Promotion materials often highlighted this aspect of his identity because it differentiated him from many competitors. The film's marketing also benefited from word-of-mouth promotion. Unlike modern releases that rely heavily on online discussion, word of mouth in 1990 spread through personal conversations, workplace discussions, and recommendations among friends and family. Because Mark for Death delivered the action audiences expected, many viewers recommended it to others. Positive word of mouth contributed significantly to its commercial success and helped extend its theatrical run. After its theatrical release, A second phase of promotion shifted to the home video market. During the early 1990s, VHS rentals represented a major source of revenue for studios. Video stores were one of the primary ways audiences discovered films. To fully understand the significance of Marked for Death, it is important to compare it with other action films of its era, as well as with other movies in Steven Seagal's career and works from similar directors and action stars. Comparative analysis reveals why the film stood out among countless action releases of the late 1980s and early 1990s, and why it continues to maintain a loyal following decades later. While the movie follows many familiar genre conventions, it also introduces unique elements that distinguish it from its contemporaries. One of the most obvious comparisons is with Steven Seagal's earlier film, Above the Law, released in 1988. Above the Law served as Seagal's introduction to mainstream audiences and established many of the characteristics that would define his screen persona. In both films, Seagal portrays a highly skilled law enforcement professional confronting criminal organizations that threaten innocent people. However, there are important differences. Above the Law focuses more heavily on conspiracy and political corruption, with a storyline centered on government misconduct and secret operations, giving it a more investigative tone. Marked for Death, by contrast, is more personal and emotionally driven. The threat extends directly to Hatcher's family and community, creating a stronger sense of personal investment. From an action perspective, Marked for Death also feels larger in scale. The villain is more memorable, the stakes are higher, and the confrontations are more intense. Many fans consider it a refinement of the formula introduced in Above the Law, taking the strongest elements of that film and presenting them in a more polished and commercially appealing package. Another useful comparison is Hard to Kill, which was released earlier in 1990. Both films feature protagonists who are forced into violent conflict after attempting to live peacefully. In Hard to Kill, Seagal's character survives an assassination attempt and seeks revenge against those responsible. Similarly, Hatcher initially desires a quiet life before being drawn back into violence. The key difference lies in the nature of the threat. Hard to Kill focuses primarily on political corruption and personal revenge, while Marked for Death expands its scope to include community protection and organized crime. Many viewers feel that Marked for Death benefits from a stronger supporting cast and a more memorable antagonist. The comparison becomes particularly interesting when examining the villains. While Hard to Kill features corrupt officials and criminal conspirators, Marked for Death introduces Screwface, a character who remains one of the most iconic villains in Seagal's filmography. This distinction alone often leads fans to rank Marked for Death among his strongest works. Perhaps the most significant comparison within Seagal's career is Under Siege, released in 1992. Under Siege is often considered Seagal's most successful and critically respected film. Both movies showcase martial arts abilities and feature highly capable protagonists confronting dangerous enemies. However, the tone differs considerably. Under Siege incorporates more humor, larger-scale action sequences, and a setting that feels almost like a classic adventure story. Marked for Death remains grounded in urban crime and personal conflict. It is darker, more intimate, and arguably more representative of the gritty action style that defined Seagal's early career. Many fans debate which film represents Seagal at his peak. Under Siege may have achieved greater mainstream recognition, but Marked for Death is often viewed as a pure example of the formula that made him popular in the first place. Comparisons with other action stars of the era are equally revealing. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, Arnold Schwarzenegger dominated the action genre with films such as The Running Man, Predator, and Total Recall. Schwarzenegger's characters often relied on overwhelming physical power, larger-than-life personalities, and spectacular action set pieces. Hatcher differs significantly from these heroes. While Schwarzenegger's characters frequently embrace humor and exaggerated heroics, Hatcher remains relatively restrained. His strength comes from discipline, skill, and tactical thinking rather than sheer physical dominance. This contrast helps Seagal carve out a unique position within the action genre. Audiences who preferred more grounded protagonists often found his characters appealing. Marked for Death exemplifies this difference particularly well. A similar comparison can be made with Sylvester Stallone's action films. Characters such as John Rambo and Marion Cobretti often operate within heightened realities where individual heroes overcome enormous armies or criminal organizations through extraordinary resilience. Although Hatcher also faces overwhelming odds, the presentation feels somewhat more realistic. His martial arts techniques, investigative methods, and decision-making processes are grounded in practical skills rather than superhuman endurance. This realism contributes to the film's appeal among viewers seeking a different type of action hero. Jean-Claude Van Damme provides another interesting point of comparison. Like Seagal, Van Damme built his career around martial arts. Films such as Bloodsport, Kickboxer, and Lionheart showcase athletic abilities and fighting techniques. However, their screen personas differ dramatically. Van Damme's characters often undergo extensive physical and emotional struggles before achieving victory. Hatcher, by contrast, projects confidence from the beginning. Release date, October 5, 1990, USA. Budget, approximately $12 million, USD. Box office, around $46 million, USD. Worldwide,